Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you and welcome to Navigating Post-Secondary Governance, Innovation, and Impact in Higher Education. We are thrilled to have you here for our third InnovED QuickCast and for what's also our latest adventure using LinkedIn Live. As you settle in, feel free to say hello in the comments and let us know where you're joining from. We would love to hear from you. And today's session is streaming live, everyone. So like any good experiment, we are learning as we go and embracing a little bit of creative unpredictability. So thank you for your patience as we navigate through a few technical wrinkles along the way. You might notice a slight delay in video or responses to your comments. That is completely part of the live streaming charm. But rest assured, the session is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants afterwards. Though you will not appear on screen, we do encourage you to interact in the chat as much as you like. So sit back, engage when you can, and enjoy the session. I'm Perry Termine, host of this year's InnovED Network of Practice, joined by my colleague Tioni Marie McLean, Portfolio Solutions Officer at OISE Continuing and Professional Learning and Program Manager here with us at InnovED. Just to give you a little bit of background about who we are, InnovED is the University of Toronto's campus-linked accelerator for innovation in education. We're based at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, or OISE, in the Office of Continuing and Professional Learning. As you may know, OISE is Canada's leading faculty of education and is consistently ranked among top 10 globally for education research. Now, launched in 2020, InnovED is the 11th accelerator in U of T's entrepreneurship ecosystem. At our core, we're really a network of practice made up of education entrepreneurs who bring diverse interdisciplinary experience to shared inquiry around educational improvement. Our members are really committed to exploring opportunities and developing solutions that advance the goals of educators and education systems here in Canada and beyond. Today's session, as you may know, is part of our QuickCast series. It's a fast-paced 30-minute listen and learn experience featuring education experts on timely and relevant topics. We're very excited for today's QuickCast, which features the insight and expertise of Dr. Catharine Lennon, an esteemed researcher, strategist, and global thought leader in higher education governance and quality assurance, which I'll share a little bit more about in a moment. One housekeeping note on that. As mentioned, this session is live streamed and may include some video delays. If you would like to access closed captioning, just click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We do encourage you to engage in the comment section throughout and after the session. That will continue on. And Mary Catharine has generously offered to stay online for a short while afterward to respond asynchronously to a few of your questions written in the chat. Now, very importantly, as we gather from Toronto and beyond, we recognize that the University of Toronto operates on land that has been the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit for thousands of years. Today, this meeting place still remains home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. So we offer our gratitude and also a call to action to reflect, to learn, and to contribute to reconciliation in meaningful ways. With this, to help set the stage for today, in an era of rising complexity and shifting priorities, post-secondary institutions are really being called to lead with purpose, agility, and clarity. Governance is really central to that mission, not just as structure, but as a strategic driver of change. So whether you're an educator, entrepreneur, policymaker, or intrapreneur, that is someone innovating from within an existing organization, the decisions made within governance frameworks shape how bold ideas are championed, how change takes root, and also how impact is scaled across the system. And with that, I'm really delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Catharine Lennon. Dr. Lennon is the head of research, international and special projects at the Post-Secondary Education Quality Assessment Board of Ontario, and she holds appointments at the Canadian and International Higher Education Centre, as well as the Department of Leadership, Adult and Higher Education here at OISE University of Toronto. She's also a two-term board director of the International Network of Quality Assurance in Higher Education, and she chairs the Committee for Capacity Building and Research. Dr. Lennon's academic and professional activities are international and comparative in scope, but are primarily focused on Canada and its institutions. She has over 40 publications on topics including system design, quality and qualifications frameworks, student mobility, credit transfer, learning outcomes, and assessment. And Dr. Lennon holds degrees from across Queen's University, Simon Fraser University, and the University of Toronto. So without further ado, hi, Mary Catharine. It's fantastic to have you here with us today. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise, and I will happily hand it over to you.
Well, hi, and thank you so much for that very generous introduction. And it really is my pleasure to connect with you today with the CPL. It's a group that I've had the pleasure of engaging with for, oh my goodness, at least 10 years now. You guys do some really interesting things, and so it's always fun to have conversations and to think about different ways to think about the work that I do and to learn from others and share experiences. So despite the fact that we can't see participants today, I really am keen on engagement. So please post your questions in the chat, and I'd be more than happy to continue conversations through LinkedIn or through email. So let me share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint here. Is that looking okay?
Coming in clear.
Okay, great. So navigating post-secondary education, innovation and impact in higher education. So I am not an innovator, but I can help you navigate post-secondary education governance. So I think um, what we're going to do today is talk about the various structures that encompass the higher education governance sector and ways in which the different levels interact and the levels of responsibility that each of those groups have. And so hopefully when you're thinking about how to be innovative in your own space, it might hopefully help you to identify maybe where you need to target your conversations or who might be most appropriate to work with. So in general, higher education governance is critical for education because it shapes the direction, the policies, and the functioning of higher education worldwide. It sets the clarity of what the institutions do, how they operate, how they're funded. And then within the institutions, there are elements like governing boards, administrative leadership, faculty members, external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, all of whom are critical to the organization's functioning. And each of those groups are significant in how they help shape the direction. But ultimately, what we have here in Canada is shared governance for higher education so that the governments set direction, institutions have autonomy, but they also shape their own direction, and then the stakeholders feed into both of those directions. And this shared model effectively balances transparency, accountability, and the institution's missions so that it is responsive to community, employer needs, student needs, but also respectful to and incorporated into the broader higher education landscape, both within the sector, be it college or university, within the province or the country, and indeed into the global higher education network. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about the different levels of governance and what sort of focus they have in policy and practice. To sort of bring it to life, I'm going to try to use internationalization and international students as a core example. Not to say that higher education governance is dry. I don't think it is, but sometimes having that real life example makes it a little easier to visualize or appreciate. So we'll talk about how the stakeholders work together. We'll talk about how the coordination and cooperation of these different levels is critical. And then hopefully what this will do is sort of give you some targeted ideas for where you might want to focus your conversations if you are um, in the area of trying to bring something into an institution or into the higher education sector. So there are four primary levels of higher education governance. First, we have the mega, which is your global, your international. So these are your large scale organizations that influence trends, rankings, cross-border collaborations. We have the meta, which are governments and regulators. So this is a lot of what higher education governance does focus on, where we have strategic directions, funding, accountability, and quality assurance. And then at the institutional level, we'll call it the meso. This is the institutions, the universities and colleges that have their strategic plans, that manage the campuses. They deal with academic programming and also manage international partnerships. And then finally, at the more micro level, we have the stakeholders. These are the students, staff, faculty that all influence institutional direction. And none of these are more important than the others. However, at the heart of it all is that meso level of the institution. So we'll spend some time focusing on that. But at the mega level, at the global international level, we have a need to coordinate higher education around the world. Because even though the province of Ontario has a great higher education system, it still needs to cooperate and recognize higher education from across the country and indeed across the world. And so having an understanding of how higher education is structured, organized, what the primary trends are, what we as higher education institutions and bodies, how we can support common goals is really important. So these high level initiatives often influence national and institutional priorities. They can go sort of two ways. They can go directly to the governments or they can go directly to the institutions, and we can talk about how they do that. But ultimately, this mega level sort of sets the stage and sort of the long-term focus for higher education. Key players in this realm are we have the OECD. They deal with data collection and benchmarking, policy recommendations, research and analysis on primary trends. UNESCO is another good resource or significant player in the field. They are more of a coordinating body in a lot of ways. So two of the primary initiatives that they have in the realm of higher education and international higher education are the Lisbon Accord and the Global Convention for Higher Education Credential Recognition. The purpose of both of these is to facilitate credential recognition so that if you have a degree coming from Ontario, it should be recognized in other jurisdictions, both across Canada and for the Lisbon Accord in Europe. So a degree coming from Italy, Spain, Germany will be recognized here in Ontario because we recognize that we have common understandings of what higher education is or what a degree looks like. And then we have the Global Convention for Higher Education, which is that same idea of credential recognition that Lisbon has, except it's more global. So countries that sign on to the Global Convention have agreed to certain parameters, which means that we in Canada, we in Ontario, should be able to, without too much background work, to accept the credentials coming out of these countries. So that's one of the primary areas that UNESCO focuses on. Another way that the mega is engaged in higher education governance is through rankings initiatives. Love them or hate them, they do play a role in how institutions respond to outside influences. So the QS ranking, Times Higher, Shanghai, all of these are ways in which institutions are able to demonstrate to the public the value that they bring. And so they can be harmful in some ways because depending on what the rankings actually look for, institutions might be focused on achieving high marks in certain areas, whether or not it's of benefit to the actual system that they exist in. But so nevertheless, all of these issues help governments and institutions to make decisions on what they are trying to achieve and how they might achieve them. So then we get into the meta. And in Canada, we have both the federal and the provincial. So this group is probably aware that in Canada, we do not have a federal jurisdiction for education. And so issues of higher education are dealt with through the federal government in a few different ways. They support research funding. They are definitely involved in immigration policies. They deal with student financial assistance. They also support labor market training, upskilling, reskilling, micro-credentials is something that the federal government is allowed to get involved with when it comes to higher education. And they also deal with global issues. So it's the feds that deal with OECD. It's the feds who deal with UNESCO, simply because neither of those bodies are able to deal with the provincial level. It's nations that these groups deal with. So it's probably no surprise to anyone to know that the choices that the federal government makes with regard to immigration, with regard to student visas, with regard to work permits, can have significant impacts on higher education and has had significant impacts on higher education. Was it 2024 when they dramatically reduced the number of student work visas that they were permitted and the number of international students that were allowed to come into the country. So the decision made at that level had significant impact both for the provinces and the institutions. I will just note that despite not having a federal government, we do have a coordinating body. It's the Council of Ministers of Education Canada, and that's where all of the provincial and territorial ministers come together to discuss issues of mutual importance. So it's when those ministers agree on things like the Global Convention or the Lisbon Accord that Canada is then able to become signatories. And I'll just say that we are currently Lisbon Accord signatories, and we are in the process of becoming Global Convention signatories. We have all of the PTs, provinces and territories, signed on, but it is now in the hands of Global Affairs Canada. So we're looking forward to that coming through. So the provincial governments. I'm going to focus on Ontario because we are in Ontario, and it's just a great example. It's the largest system in Canada. So what we currently have is the Ministry of Colleges, Universities, Research Excellence, and Security. Now that name has been recently changed, and no one's really sure what security means, but I'm sure it'll become clear at some point. What the ministry has is oversight for all of post-secondary education and employment skills in Ontario. So colleges, universities, private career colleges, as well as Indigenous institutes. It plans and administers policies related to basic and applied research, authorizes universities to grant degrees, definitely deals with the funding, provides student financial assistance, and recognizes Indigenous institutes. The other thing that it does is it supports the institutions in their strategic mandates. So every few years, I think it's every like 3 to 5 years, every institution creates a strategic plan, and that is brought forward to the government, and the government endorses it, sometimes with some modifications, to ensure that what the institution is trying to do is in line with government initiatives, longer term planning, and that there is fair distribution of activities across the system. Because as we get into the meso level, you'll see that there is complete autonomy within the institutions in many, many ways. But at the same time, there is a need for provincial coordination. So the coordination takes place within these 4 pillars: universities, colleges, private career colleges, and the Indigenous institutes. Apprenticeship is a little bit outside of these sectors, but nevertheless, we'd like to think of it as under the umbrella of higher education, despite some complications in how it's actually connected to it. We also have 13 private institutions that are either niche institutions, such as Canadian Chiropractic College, or international branch campuses, something like the Northeastern University, which operates. So it's the role of the ministry to make sure that all of these organizations, all of these institutions are meeting their expectations. And they do so in a couple of different ways. One is that they have a qualifications framework. So Ontario has a qualifications framework, which clearly articulates the academic expectations for each of the degree and diploma levels. And so each of the colleges and universities must demonstrate how their programming aligns with and adheres to those expectations. And once you have that quality assurance piece in place, then things like credit transfer, credit recognition, academic mobility into, next phase of graduate studies or something like that. All of those are facilitated on the grounding of a qualifications framework. So then we get into the meso level, and this is probably where the majority of you would be maybe most interested. It's sort of understanding what happens where within the institutions. So governance at the university, this is for the university particularly. Colleges are a little bit different. For the sake of time, I'm not gonna go into explaining that, but happy to talk about it in the chat if you'd like to after. So at the universities, we have the Board of Governors. This is the highest body at the university. Academia, business, alumni are all present. Sometimes there's student governors. But this group is really focused on the business of the institution. So they'll focus on things like international partnerships. They'll focus on things like, they'll focus on the finances of the institution. They are primarily responsible for the finances of the institution. And in that, therefore, they have responsibility also for the strategic planning of the institution. They do things like hiring the president, and things like that. But they do not get involved with any of the academics. That's the responsibility of the University Senate, and that's the academic governing board, and that has faculty, students, and administration all present. And they deal with things like curriculum, program approvals. They deal with things like program closures or hirings. So this is really the heart of the academic side of the university, where the Board of Governors is more the business side of the university. And then, of course, we have the institutional administration, which is critical. It's the backbone of the institution. They deal with the university operations. They deal with all of the reporting that goes to the government. They deal with all of the management of day-to-day operations within the institution. And those are significant. They range from everything from campuses, like various campuses, to food services, to residences, to parking, to supporting student groups. So those are the sort of the heart of the institution. And then when we think about the organization within that, we have the president. This is more the academic side of things rather than the administrative side of things. The president deals with strategic planning, oversees all operations. The provost, again, president, more business. Provost deals with all of the academic planning, and so is sort of the liaison between the business and the academics. The deans are responsible for each academic college or school and report to the provost. And then, of course, you have the department chairs, and those chairs report to the deans that report to the provost. Faculty members, they are primarily within their department, focused on their own research and teaching and learning. And then you have contingency faculty, who are contracted faculty who deal with teaching and administrative activities. So those are sort of the primary groups within the institution. And then the micro, the stakeholders. I have them here as micro, but they're actually quite a powerful group. So the faculty unions and associations can derail things for administrations if they do not appreciate or do not want what the administration is coming forward with. Staff unions as well. They have a significant role. They are the ones that are implementing the projects, the initiatives, the strategies. And so, so their input is significantly valued and also is critical for actually implementing some of the goals of the institution. Student governments and associations, obviously students are central to the university. And so ensuring that students are engaged and supportive of strategic directions is absolutely critical, because students can also derail things very quickly if they don't agree with the strategic planning. And then finally, we have employers and community. Those are the partners in determining programmatic needs. They liaise with students, they liaise with the faculty unions, they liaise with the staff unions. So ensuring that employers and community are also engaged, not just at the Board of Governors level, but also at the grassroots level of programmatic and institutional planning, is quite critical. So that's sort of a whirlwind tour of higher education governance. So at the center of it all, we really deal with institutional administration. So you want to deal with your board of governors, your senators, and your institutional administration. You have these global factors that shape direction. You have government that shapes direction. You have stakeholders that shape direction, and the governing bodies that also shape direction. So no one group has more power than the others, and they must work together collaboratively for any of the initiatives, goals, strategies to actually be actualized. That went longer than I thought, and I didn't even get into any examples, so forgive me for that. Perry, how are we for time? What do you think?
We're wonderful for time, Mary Catherine. Thank you. And
Okay.
thank you for such a rich and insightful presentation. I think this really outlined what many of us have been curious about, and you've really helped us explore governance not merely as a structure, but as that strategic element where we get to sort of reveal the potential that lies in each level, policy, and process in terms of impact. So, and I know we do have a moment for a question or two, Mary Catherine, if that works for you.
Yeah, I'd be
You
happy to.
Wonderful. I'm just pulling a little bit from what we heard during the registration process and some of the themes that have come forward. You mentioned the power of the micro level, even within the meso, right? So this sort of interaction between us as individuals, us as community members or students. I wonder if you could build on that a little bit in terms of how post-secondary governance structures can adapt or have been able to adapt to foster innovation in connection with that micro level. Is that something you'd be able to comment a little bit more on, or your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, one example of how the different levels can come together or challenge each other to find the best way forward with that shared governance idea is in regard to international student recruitment. Some institutions have chosen, rather than to support international students in-house, to contract with an adjacent institution or an adjacent body to recruit students, put them through their first year. If those students are then successful, then they are rooted into the institution.
Mm.
Boards of governors love this idea. It takes away a lot of the risk for them in supporting students that they aren't quite sure of their academic capacities. So boards love this. Senate's academic faculty members don't love this so much, because they don't feel that they then have the ability to vet students themselves, because someone else is doing the vetting. And there's a fear also that there's that commodification of international students. So faculty members don't like it. Students, as you can presume, don't like it either, because they feel like it's kind of a backdoor for international students to get in, because they're not going through the initial admissions process. So that's one side of it. And then on the other side of it, they also feel that that's actually just creating a situation for international students to be unfairly treated as cash cows, because that secondary institution can be quite expensive as that first year. So in some institutions, they've completely disrailed it, and contractual arrangements have fallen apart. And in other situations, faculty, students, senates have been able to modify the arrangements so that they are more compatible and in line with perhaps what they see as the strategic direction of the institution.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. So I'm hearing that there is potentially this appetite for third-party collaboration, but it's really finding that balance and navigating the business hat and the education hat and these different levels of governance that are at play in terms of finding that sweet spot of impact and innovation. Is that fair to say?
I think that's absolutely fair to say. A great business plan is a great business plan, but unless the faculty members are involved and buy into it, it will very quickly be halted.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mary Catherine. It's been wonderful to connect with you here today. Um, and it's just always such an honor to work together with you. So thank you, Mary Catherine, and to everyone joining us today with the minute that we have left. Thank you for lending your time, your curiosity, and your vision. We hope today's session has sparked some new insight and deeper thinking about your role and the broader roles in shaping education systems for the better. But please do, as Mary Catherine said, continue that conversation in the comments. We'd love to continue on this thread. And as we conclude, we would really love your feedback. A brief survey link is being shared in the comments. Hopefully it came through. And I'm sorry if the hyperlink is a little bit funky in there. If you copy and paste that URL and follow that, it will just take a moment to give us some feedback and really help us refine future QuickCasts. So thank you again for your contributions and your thoughtful exchange today. We encourage you to continue that conversation. Dr. Lennon and us will be online for a short time to respond asynchronously. And remember, your ideas, your questions, and your creativity are truly the fuel for a better education future. So we look forward to seeing what you imagine and make possible next. Until next time, stay inspired, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Catherine.
Thank you.